welcome back to Math Mini Lessons. In our last lesson, we talked about division and expressing in fractional form. In this lesson, we're going to go to multiplication and figure out how to interpret and express multiplication in different ways. And one of the ways we're going to look at it is to express multiplication of fractions in expanded form, to express multiplication of fractions as a number sentence or two operations, and to accurately solve problems with products of fractions. All right, let's jump into it. When we multiply a fraction by a whole number, what does it actually mean? So it might look something like this, where I have, let's say I have something like 3/4 times, let's do something like 8. What does this mean? Well, in the first part, our fraction, of course, tells us something about a part and whole, like something we have out of and how we're sharing it. So we saw that in this last lesson that this can be expressed as actually division. And then this part over here, the Q is telling me how many groups I have. So in this case here, I have 3/4 times 8. I could think of this as 3 groups of 3/4. That's one way I can interpret this with our multiplication. So seeing it this way. But in our last lesson, we also talked about division being seen in a fraction. So I could also express this 3/4 as 3 divided by 4 and then multiplied by 8. So there's some division and multiplication. There are two operations here. Let's look at our first model problem. Bettina spent $75 on 5 shirts and they each cost the same price. 3 of the shirts were red. Which expression represents the total cost of the red shirt? So this is what I'm trying to find. How much did she spend on red shirts? Okay, so there are a few things here that I'm noticing, but the first thing I want to think about is there a part to whole relationship? Like when I think about the red shirts, what part are the red shirts? And I know that 3 of the shirts are red. So 3 out of 5 shirts are red. And how much did she spend on all 5 shirts? Well, we know it was $75. So I could represent this as 3/5 times 75 because I want to know what part she spent, what part of $75. Or you could also rewrite this as 75 times 3/5. This kind of makes sense because I know she didn't spend all the $75 on red shirts. She only spent a part of it. And that matches our thinking right over here for A. 75 times 3/5. For the other choices, the reason why it doesn't work, well, for here, it does. For B, it doesn't work because we don't have 5/3. That doesn't make sense. We have 3 out of 5 shirts, so that's why that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to highlight that. This is where that error is. And the other one, I can see a lot of kids picking C, 75 divided by 5, because that's telling them what each shirt, how much she's spending on each shirt. And that could help us, so I get that. But once you know the price of one shirt, you're going to multiply it by 3. That's the problem with C. 75 over 5 tells us how much one shirt is. But then I would have to multiply that by 3, so that doesn't make sense. And in the third one, this is just like a throwaway 75 over X. That doesn't make any sense in this problem at all. All right, so let's hit pause and jot this down. This one was a little complicated, but we're going to practice this a little bit more in the next one. Let's think about different ways I can express this type of problem. So write 2 expressions that are equivalent to 5 times 7/8. So let's start with the first way, which is just I have 5 groups of 7/8. So this is kind of a repeated addition one where I can see it as 7/8 plus 7/8 plus 7/8 plus 7/8 plus 7/8. So I could see it as I can just express my multiplication as repeated addition. But I could also see it as 2 operations. And in this case, that means I'm turning my fraction to division. To make it super clear. So my 5 times, that stays there, and my 7 over 8 becomes 7 divided by 8. So there you have it. We have 2 different ways that we can solve this problem. So now the second part says use either way to simplify the expression. Okay, so if I did the repeated addition, 7/8, 7/8, 7/8 plus 7/8 plus 7/8, I would have 35 over 8. That's what I get here. And of course, now that I have that, I still have to divide. 35 divided by 8, I have to finish that. 8 goes into 35 4 times. That gives us 32. And that means I have 3 left over out of 8. All right, so I still needed to do division here to get to my final solution, 4 3/8. So let's look at our second way, which is the 2 operations. 5 times 7 divided by 8. I'm going to do this part first. 5 times 7 is 35. And now I just rewrite the rest, divided by 8. Same thing, look, same place we were a second ago. We know that 35 divided by 8 is 4 with a remainder of 3 out of 8. So both of these ways get us to the exact same answer. Hit pause and jot this down into your notes. All right, let's go into our guided practice. This is the one you're going to try on your own. You'll hit pause and solve it, and then I'll reveal the answer for it. There are 2 different ways we can solve this, so I'm actually going to show both different ways. Each day last week, Miss Wilson walked 3/4 of a mile. What is the total distance in miles that Miss Wilson walked in 4 days? Write an expression that represents the scenario and then choose the correct solution. Okay, so hit pause and solve this for yourself. All right, let's do the reveal. Actually, there are 3 ways I can see people solving this problem. The first one is just a traditional way that we've talked about since before this lesson, which is just multiply a fraction times a whole number. And so in reading this problem, we know Miss Wilson walks 3/4 of a mile, and she does this for 4 days. We want to know how many days she walked in all. How can we figure this out? So you could have just done 4 times 3/4. That's very valid if that was the way you had it written down. And then you would just multiply, you would turn that whole number to a fraction, multiply, and you would get 3 as your answer, which is the correct answer. So this is one way you could have solved it. Another way is if you wanted to do repeated addition, you could have just done 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4 and just done a repeated addition each day. Also valid, also works. And again, you'd get 12 out of 4, which equals 3. So these 2 ways work very, very well. But if you also want to try our 2 operations, you could have said 4 times 3 divided by 4. And that's where you turned your fraction into a division problem. And that also would have given you the same answer. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So any of these ways, no matter which way you had done it, you would have gotten the same answer, 3. So I hope you found this really helpful, that you can be more fluid and see how many different ways we can express a problem like this, and choose the one often that will help you solve it best. There is no judgment. We want to see what makes the most sense for you. But I also want you to be able to recognize these different expressions so that when it comes up on a test or a quiz, you're not overwhelmed and shocked. Now you recognize it as just another way of showing 4 times 3/4 of a whole number times a fraction. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next lesson, 5th graders. Bye-bye.